Hi, everyone, and welcome to your journey to accreditation. This is Standard 2 that we're going to be talking about today. And our journey so far has seen us go through a sort of an introduction of how you can set yourself up for success, followed by Standard 1, which was covered last week. Today, we're going to be beginning our journey with Standard 2, very exciting. So hopefully by the end of Standard 2, we can say 2 down and then just a few more to go, and then you're on your way. Let me begin with this. Okay. Let me just get this here. 1 second. Can everyone see the PowerPoint presentation? If someone can just write in the chat. Thank you. Okay, so just a brief summary of what we're going to be covering today. Right, so we're going to do, as last week, we're going to do a review of Standard 2. Then we're going to talk about the type of evidences that you can use. For Standard 2, there's actually a bigger scope of evidences that you can use in comparison to Standard 1. And I'll be talking about some of those and what you might want to be able to collect. Again, I'll just recap some evidence strategies. Strategies for collecting evidence. I'll show you an example from my report for a piece of evidence that I use. We'll again talk about annotation, and then I'll provide you with an annotation example, and then we will be able to do a quick question and answer session at the end. I do have the chat box live, so if you do have any questions, make sure to just type your question there and I'll answer it as I'm going through this. Okay, so Standard 2, know the content and how to teach it. So one of the interesting things about this standard is that this actually gives you sort of the brightest light to shine on your ability to do teach. Now, when we're talking about content, it doesn't necessarily have to be the content that you're necessarily trained in. So the content just has to be that you understand it as best as you can in order to be able to teach it. So for example, if you are an English teacher and you've been asked to teach science, for example, or you're a math teacher and you've been asked to teach drama, or you're a tactile technologies teacher and you've been asked to teach geography. The only difference is that you should be able to demonstrate that you understand the content that you are teaching and that you have developed strategies about how to teach it. So the strategy for this is that we'll just quickly read through the standards and we'll just kind of make sure that we're all on the same page. So 2.1.2 starts with apply knowledge of the content and teaching strategies of the teaching area to develop engaging teaching activities. So when we're thinking about evidences, we're actually thinking more about the activities. Okay, what are the things we're getting the students to do? We're showing that we understand the content, but we're also understanding how we need to filter that content and modify it to make sure that our students are able to access it. Standard 2.2, organize content into coherent, well-sequenced learning and teaching program. This is basically scaffolding, just with extra words. Okay, so when we think about 2.2.2, we're thinking about the scaffolding ladder. How do we set everything up so that it's a logical sequence of events, so then the students are able to learn. Standard 2.3.2, design and implement learning and teaching programs using knowledge of the curriculum, assessment, and reporting requirements. So this is also an opportunity to be able to link your curriculum goals, whether that's at a school level or at a faculty level. You can talk about your assessments that you've got. So assessments that are yearly assessments, or they could be like, hello, welcome. So yeah, so they can be assessments that like a yearly exams, they can be assessments faculty level, they can even just be your own assessments for the class. 2.4.2, provide opportunities for students to develop understanding of and respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, cultures, and languages. So that means that in order to understand the content and how to teach it, that we are also finding ways where possible to include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures, and languages in that. That can be a bit of a challenging thing to do sometimes, but I will be talking about some evidences that you can use to be able to meet that criteria. Then 2.5.2, apply knowledge and understanding of effective teaching strategies to support students' literacy and numeracy achievements. Just a point on that, NAPLAN evidence does not count. It is, I've seen some people that have put their hand up and said, oh, you know, not that we're meant to be doing it, but we're doing some NAPLAN prep in preparation for upcoming NAPLAN, and it should be made clear that that's not actually evidence that you can use, but it needs to be that you are finding strategies where you are incorporating literacy and numeracy elements into your lessons. It can't be done all the time, I understand. For instance, if you teach maths, you're definitely meeting the numeracy requirement, but it may be difficult to meet the literacy requirement and vice versa. So that's just something to keep in mind. 2.6.2, use effective teaching strategies to integrate ICT into learning and teaching programs to make selected content relevant and meaningful. For those that had to go through COVID last year, maybe as a casual, short-term teacher or long-term teacher, everyone's got online and everyone started using Google Classroom and Zoom and different websites. So ICT became a really big factor in a lot of students' learning. And it is still a factor in some students' learning with long distance and everything like that. So when we're thinking about ICT, we're thinking about Google, computers, PowerPoints, videos, multimedia, anything you can get. Okay, so now let's talk about some evidences. Now, you will note on this list that the evidences that are there are going to look very similar to the evidences that you can collect for Standard 1. The difference is, though, is that this time you are demonstrating how you understand the content and then how you teach it. Okay, so you're going, okay, even if you're teaching out of area, you're demonstrating that you did your research, that you watched documentaries, that you read the academic literature available to you at the time, that you're able to demonstrate a deep understanding of what it is that you're going to teach. Because that's what they're really looking at for Standard 2. So a couple of options you have, lesson plans or day plans. Lesson plans that show modifications. This is really useful. So if you have a lesson plan that you're teaching and you're talking about something that might have a link to a current affair. So you could talk about COVID, you might talk about the bushfires from last year, you might talk about international affairs that are happening. You may not have planned to speak about that with the students, but you might find that the students have been able to make a connection between the content and current affair. So if that does happen in your class, that's an opportunity to take your lesson plan, get a pen, and then just scribble and change and just say, students have made a connection. We're now talking about this. I've come up with an idea of how we can continue to embed that learning and that content into the students' repertoire. Evidence for Standard 2 also allows you to supply student work samples. So you're able to say, look, this is the content that I had to teach, and this is proof that the students were able to understand and use that new learning. You can also have a lesson plan showing differentiated learning strategies, so ICT, higher order thinking. This is especially useful if you have some familiarity with your students. Now, I do understand as a casual that it may be difficult to develop that student-teacher relationship where you understand how the students think and how they learn. But if you're able to incorporate things like individual learning plans or, discussions that you've had in the faculty class, in regards to you teaching that class, or if you've been able to talk to the teacher prior and been able to say, are there any students I should look out for in terms of their learning, and how I can differentiate? This will be a benefit, because then if you included that in your lesson plan, either prior when you've written it up or with a pen, you've just added it in, that will count as evidence for standard 2. Teacher reflections. So if you are doing a lesson that is out of your established KLA, you can reflect on your ability to have taught that effectively. One of the interesting things that happened with me that I did last year is I, as a casual teacher, was given quite a lot of time to teach Year 7 math class. I'm not math trained, but as a habit, I started to write a reflection at the end of every math class or at the end of the day. And with that reflection, I was able to build up quite a bit of evidence. I didn't end up using it in my report, but I did feel that having that reflection really gave me a sense of security, not just for me as a teacher, but also in terms of my accreditation. Lesson observation notes can easily be used because you're able to demonstrate to your supervisor that you understand the content and how to teach it. I was very fortunate to have done an observation of a teacher who was a fantastic history teacher. And he was able to do things in the classroom that I never considered. And I actually ended up implementing that as part of my own teaching method. So lesson observation notes definitely help, and you can add that as evidence. If you write up a program, that can be used as evidence. If you're able to demonstrate that you have an understanding of the content and how to select relevant resources to be able to deliver that content, that's like video, worksheet, things like that, that should definitely be considered. Again, going back on reflections, if you have a lesson plan, you might do a reflection, you might do the lesson plan, teach it, and then be able to say, okay, look, this is the lesson I have, this is my reflections on it, do some professional reading, and then go back and say, well, the professional reading actually said I should have done this, or I should have considered that. Chloe is asking a question. The screenshot from Google Classroom GL lessons, perfectly fine. Okay, so if you want to use that as evidence, go ahead. And you're going to see the evidence that I put up, and you'll understand why I'm giving that a thumbs up. You can use screenshots, you can use images, you can use PDF scans, you can use anything as long as you're able to present it as a piece of evidence. Another piece of evidence that you can do is meeting notes, demonstrating your contribution to collegial planning and preparation. As a casual, if it is possible for you to stay back and attend a staff meeting for a staff that either you have that relationship already, like you might work at a school regularly and find that there's a faculty that you generally tend to find yourself a lot in, or a faculty that you're drawn to spending a lot of time in, ask if you can, every now and then on a day that you've been called in for work, ask if you can stay back and attend staff meetings or the faculty meetings. This is a way for you to be able to collect some evidence and to be able to talk about some of the classes you're teaching, maybe within that faculty or elsewhere, but somewhere where you're able to contribute and also to take away planning, preparation, or anything related to the content. There's a typo there, I just realized. We don't talk about the typos. Okay, so there's more evidence. What I actually found when I was writing this is that I was a little bit irritated that there's more evidence options for standard 2 than there was for standard 1. So there's a few more slides of this coming. All right, so some other evidence you can consider is teacher notes demonstrating the selection and organization of content using old and current affairs to create meaning. We live in an interesting time where our students are absorbing content from various different media. Okay, so not just social media, but Netflix, YouTube, podcasts on Spotify. They're getting stories sent to them via Twitter, via Snapchat. They're getting a lot of new information given to them all the time. So it's always good for us to be thinking, okay, if I am going to teach a lesson, should I teach a lesson using this worksheet from, say, the 1990s or the early 2000s? Or should I create a worksheet that's a little bit more relevant or looks a little bit more like it was made recently? If I'm looking at a history lesson or a geography lesson or a science lesson and I have a video that is included, should I consider a video that has the core information, the core content I want to teach? Or should I complement that with a video that has the latest research or a documentary on that information? To be able to show that you are thinking and that you are planning to organize your content in a way that you are making it so that it is relevant to the student of today. Written reflections on and analysis of lessons which show that the teacher has read, knows, and understand all relevant curriculum, assessment, and reporting policies and support documents. The easiest way to do this is to be able to show some professional reading that you are doing in a subject. So as a casual, you may not have a whole lot of time to spend every evening reading several, dense academic books in order to be able to prepare for whatever lessons you're given the next day. But you need to be able to demonstrate some way in which you have read, know, and understand the curriculum, assessment, and reporting guidelines. The easiest way to do this is to actually get your school that is going to be supervising you is to look at the school plan. So get a copy of their school plan, read through it, and then make some notes for yourself. Some reflections on the school plan, reflections on you as a teacher, and how you intend to help the school achieve those the school plan outcomes. And this is really useful whether you're day-to-day or whether you're long-term, because if you're able to say the school has a document that it's looking at, and this document is something that's going to help the school achieve certain goals, I want to reflect on that, because in reflecting on what the school outcomes want or what the school wants, I am able to adjust my teaching so that the school is able to make sure that they're meeting the curriculum, assessment, and reporting policies. You can present examples of student learning outcomes with feedback to students. So if you have an assignment or you have a worksheet that you've got or something that you would like to present, you can actually, provide the feedback that you're giving as a way for you to demonstrate that you understand the content and that you understand how to teach it. So the best way to do this is to differentiate your evidence a little bit. Try and find at least three: someone in the high ability, someone in the mid ability, someone in the low ability. So then you present those three pieces as one piece of evidence, and you're able to demonstrate that you understand the content. This might be, and I'm not talking that you understand the content simply by marking spelling or marking grammar, but you might have a piece of student work where you are showing that you have more knowledge than the student, and to guide the student on to being able to gain more knowledge. For example, you might have a high ability student who did a research task, for example, and did a very good presentation. You might be writing feedback where you're talking about how the student might consider other sources to consider, or that the student might consider how he or she might interpret interpret things from the sources or from the reading or something, to demonstrate that you understand the content and that you're pushing the student to achieve a higher outcome. If you have a student who's in a low ability, you might talk about how you understand the content, but you might change the language a little bit. The way you write to a high ability student will be different to how you write to a low ability student. And if you're able to present that kind of evidence, you're able to say that, yes, you know the content, you want to be able to push the students to be able to achieve greater outcomes, but you can differentiate your feedback. So then different students are getting different feedback. You can use Markbook if you have one. Try and be a little bit aware of the privacy of students. So if you are going to use Markbook, you'll have to erase, I think, the surnames. However, you'll need to check with your supervisor about that. My understanding is that if they're very common names, you can keep them in as a piece of evidence for Markbook. However, if the names are easily identifiable, you will have to blank them out. So if you've got 3 Joes or 3 Michaels or 3 Sams, that's fine. But if you've got really unique first names, you will have to blank out the whole thing. But you can use a Markbook to be able to show that you understand the content. A really good thing with Markbook is to be able to talk about the data in the Markbook. So you might say at the beginning of the term, I marked student work and it was at this. By the end of the term, I was marking the work and the students have been able to show an improvement of X amount. You can also present an assessment plan, which shows clear links to the learning and teaching program and the reporting cycle. Most faculties will have an assessment schedule of some kind, so that's a very easy one to use. But you might want to think about any of the assessments you are making to test student knowledge within the classroom. All right. Other evidences you can use is a lesson or day plan with a range of teaching and learning activities to support student understanding of and respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, culture, and languages. So this can be done in several ways. If you are teaching a subject where you can include that as part of the natural flow of your lesson, by all means, please go ahead and do that. If you are struggling to be able to demonstrate that outcome, don't be afraid to make the lesson explicitly about that, where you might explicitly be talking about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, culture, or language in relation to the subject that you're teaching. This will be a way for you to demonstrate that not only do you understand the content, but you also are able to understand Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, cultures, and language, and how they can be merged together. I do recognize that there are times where that can be a challenge, because there are some subjects where that may not always mesh well. I remember I had to teach electronics, and it was very difficult to be able to find a way to include that. But the way I was able to manage it is I was able to talk about a Aboriginal artist in Sydney and how he was able to use different lighting and computer programming to be able to display artwork from his local artists in his area that were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and that achieved that outcome. But I had to make a whole lesson specifically addressing that outcome if I wanted to meet it. So it's just something to consider. Again, you can use student work samples that display student work which shows student understanding of and respect for Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander history, cultures, and languages. So this can be in essay form, or it can be a worksheet, or it can be anything that a student has produced that's able to demonstrate that from the content they're able to find a link of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures. You can also use records of participation in field work or community involvement to develop understanding of and respect for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, cultures, and languages. So for instance, if you work in a school which do have a high population of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and you want to get to know that culture better, being able to reach out to the local council, and you just say, I'm a teacher, I'm going to this school, I'm getting a lot of work there as casual, or I'm working there long term. I'd like to get a little bit more involved in the community and understand the local history. And the local council will help you be able to find that. That could be whether they, through a tour or through an academic paper or something that they're able to show you the history of the area. Or they will introduce you to local elders in the area, so then you have a better understanding of who are the key players in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Chloe is asking a question, how about the history program incorporated a lesson with Torres Strait Islander cultures? Perfect. We can use that as evidence. So just like, this is one of those things where, again, certain subjects are going to be easier to incorporate this than others. Okay. This is a good description of the meet if you can meet it. If you can't meet it, don't feel like you've let yourself down or you've let everyone else down by not being able to meet that descriptor. So long as you're able to say that you gave it a good try. You really did try to incorporate it in some way, shape, or form. But if you don't, that's okay. It's just as long as you meet it somewhere else in your report. And this is the last piece of evidence. Lesson and all day plans with a variety of ICT teaching and learning activities. For example, web-based research, Web 2.0 tools such as podcasts, blogs, social bookmarking, social networking, RSS, use of ICT applications such as Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and subject KLA stage-appropriate software that link to syllabus outcome objectives and take into account available ICT resources. That is a mouthful. The way that I look at this in terms of evidence, and I'm going to be showing you my evidence because this is how I was able to link mine. If you're anything that you do with a computer that you've made a lesson plan for, you can include it. I tend to stay away from anything that is social media related because that tends to be a bit of a challenge with students as is. But if you want to be able to do anything which you are showing content and how to teach it through ICT, go ahead. One of the things that I find interesting is that there is a lot of new technology coming out that you can look into that can be used as evidence. So for instance, at my school, we have VR headsets. We haven't employed them on a grand scale yet, but with the VR headsets, we were able to show our Year 11 biology students a 3D model of a heart. Or through the VR headsets, we were able to show people walking through the Lantern Festival in China. There are other things as well. You can talk about video games. So if there is a video game or if there is something that students are able to do in a classroom that helps them understand the content a little bit more, by all means, go ahead. If you are having students using computer software to create content that demonstrates that they understand the purpose of the subject or the purpose of the lesson, you can add that in as well. So this ICT gives you a bit of a way to kind of create a collage in a lot of ways where you can say, this was the lesson outcome, but this was how multiple students use different software to come up with the same thing. Yeah, pretty cool. Okay, so before I pass on from the evidence, is there anything, does anyone want to say anything? Okay, Chloe has another question. Is it okay if my evidence documentation is black and white? Absolutely. No one's going to care if it's black or white or color. The only thing that does matter is that your supervisor and your principal and ultimately NESA need to be able to see whatever the evidence is very clearly. There are a few times where someone has done a really bad scan of some images or something, put it in a PDF and then just attach it and said, yeah, that should be fine. And no one can make sense of what it looks like. So long as you can say, I understand what I'm looking at, then you're fine. Just having a quick sip before I move on. Okay. Right, continuing. Same as last week, Strategies for collecting evidence. As always, look to the work you already have. You should already have made, by now, you should have made some type of evidence in some way, shape or form. So dig through your old hard drives, look through your book bag, look in your car. You know, as we know, the law flies around everywhere, but I'm sure that there's a piece of evidence that you already have that covers this standard. If you haven't got it, make it. That's the simplest solution. If you haven't got the evidence, make it, implement it, use it as soon as possible, and then make sure that you're writing notes on the day that you use it or something. So then we know that you didn't just type it up and then submit it without having actually used it. Again, if you're booked into school in advance, speak with the person you're relieving and ask if it's okay to plan a lesson. Even if it's out of field, you can still use the evidence. I know that this can sometimes be hard, especially if you're a casual teacher, where you're getting called in day to day and you don't know what class it is that you're going to cover. However, if you can talk with your head teacher, admin, or whoever's the casual person at your school, talk with them. Say you want to be proactive. Say you want to try and develop a lesson plan, teach a lesson, something like that. But say you do need at least, say, 24 hours advance notice. The school that's supervising you will find a way to be able to help you do that. And they will say, okay, such and such is doing their accreditation. They're very keen to teach a lesson. All right, we'll see what we can do. Just to let you know, the standard 2 gives you quite a range of evidence to demonstrate your understanding of content and how to teach it. You will find multiple evidence that meet standard 2, keep them and make sure that you can repurpose them for any of the other standards coming up. Okay, so if you find some screenshots that you've taken and you've got a lesson plan and you've got all this and you're like, I've got all this stuff that meets standard 2, fantastic. Don't discard it, just make sure you choose one, but then keep the others because they might come useful down the road. All right. I am now going to show you a sample of my my evidence for standard 2. So what I actually did is I provided a worksheet. Now, this was a lesson that I was teaching last year, and my lesson was to introduce students into Minecraft. I had a lot of low ability and mid ability students, and so I had to find something that was able to really break down step by step what students had to do in order to do block coding. Okay, so what I did is I found this worksheet. I edited some parts of it. I added in some screenshots to be able to really show what it is that I want the students to do. When I was making this piece of evidence, I wasn't actually thinking about my accreditation at the time. I was just thinking about the students. But then when I was reviewing and getting ready to write my accreditation, I just sort of cast my mind back and I went, well, when is the time that I had to create a worksheet, or I had to create something that was able to show not only that I knew the content, but I understood how to teach it to the kids that I had. And that's how I came up with this, okay? Now the worksheet is, standard worksheet. There was a template from Microsoft that I was able to use, and I was able to knock this together at the time. I knocked this together in about half an hour. Then when I was looking for evidence, I was just going through my drive and I found this and I went, oh, okay, that's a pretty easy one I can just include. And the annotation itself took me about probably all of 15 minutes to write. So a worksheet is definitely gives you a possibility to include. That's the one I used. And then I was able to say, well, look, in my annotation, which I'll be explaining shortly, this is why I chose this piece of evidence. Okay. By the way, I forgot to ask, it was, hang on a second. Is everyone seeing the evidence I'm showing at the moment, the worksheet? Yeah. All right. I've just been talking for a few minutes and then bragging and then no one can see it. Let me fix that up. Can everyone see the worksheet now? There we go. Too small. Okay. All right. Let me see if I can zoom in for you. 1 second. How's that now? Is that a little bit easier to see? Yep. Okay. So the annotation, let me just get to the annotation for you. Okay, so this is the annotation for the evidence that I provided. Okay, I'll just read it out for those that might not be able to hear it, to see the video. Okay, the workbook demonstration standard descriptors 2.1.2 and 2.6.2 due in conjunction with the introduction to Minecraft lesson. The lesson went from teachers-led to student-centered since they will be working individually as they enrolled and explored the software and course requirements. Before the activity began, we had a quick overview of digital technology and how students interact with different technologies, smartphone, laptops, PC, gaming console. This will build upon students' prior knowledge of certain technologies from the content taught. The activity was very engaging for students, and once they were successfully online with their own Minecraft education account and world, they were able to compete with each other to earn a merit award for the fastest code compiled. The results saw some students receiving a merit award and all students understanding the content in the program successfully. As ICT forms a core element of the coursework, students were able to see their code blocks and share their code blocks that have been successful. To my advantage, I had a smart board, so I was able to incorporate and demonstrate how certain code can be dragged and dropped to get results, allowing students to do this and adapting a kinesthetic learning. Some students have better visual learning, so it was beneficial to their needs. As you can see, that looks like I wrote that in 15 minutes, and I did. When I wrote it and I finished it, and I felt that I had explained the evidence enough, I kind of stopped, and I just said, that's good enough, and then I moved on. My supervisor was happy with it. The thing about writing an annotation is that you don't want to write it with an enormous amount of jargon or meta language or anything that shows, that you have a deep academic understanding of the evidence that you're presenting. You want to be able to just present it simply, easily. This is what it is. This is what it does. This is how it links to the descriptors. Okay, cool. See you later. Where did you get this evidence details form? Is it ETAM? Okay, so Anne-Marie, what will happen is once you get a supervisor, and once the supervisor has been assigned to you, ETAMS actually opens up an online portion for you to submit your evidence and your annotations. So what happens is that there'll be a snapshot. So there'll be a screen where you can upload your evidence. You tick your descriptors, so you pick which standard and which descriptor the evidence meets, and then there will be a annotation box, just like this on the screen. It will be blank, and then all you have to do is just type in what your annotation is. What I found that was really useful is that I actually wrote my annotations in Word first. I have a Word document where I just compiled all of this together. And then when it came to actually uploading the evidence, it literally took me less than an hour. I just went through and I just uploaded every piece of evidence one after the other, added all my my standards and their descriptors, And then I just copied and paste from the Word document into the annotation box. And then once that was all in order, I would just hit submit, and then I would submit that. And then I just did the next piece of evidence and the next piece of evidence. I only did 5 pieces of evidence for my report. Counting the observation report, that brings it up to 6, and then I met the minimum. That makes sense? Sure. Let me go back to my sample. Okay. So this was my sample that I uploaded, and as you can see, it's not like just like one big piece of evidence or something. What I did is I just took screenshots of because I tried to do this clever thing where I went, okay, I'm gonna get these, 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of paper. I'm gonna scan them, and then I'm gonna find a way to put 4 pages into one on a Word doc or in Adobe. What's the program? Adobe InDesign. And then it just wasn't working, and I was spending way too much time trying to do it. So I just simply took screenshots from my computer and then just put it all together. This is actually 4 JPEG images slapped onto a Word document and then converted into a PDF, which is why it looks a little bit blurry. But the good thing is that when I was speaking with my supervisor about this, he had the hard copy. So he could actually look at the hard copies and then be able to say, okay, that makes sense. And then when my principal saw it, he said the same thing. I gave him the hard copies and he looked at this and he went, okay, they make sense. And that's my little piece of evidence. The students had to make a chicken storm. So they had to they had to run a bit of code where they could type in a program, and then the program would generate chickens that would fall on their heads. And for a low ability class, it caused a lot of giggles and a lot of laughs. Some people using arrows in their annotation. Is that the old format? Yes. So on the original way, the proficient report used to be handed in. You had to do it on a big, massive Word document and then send it in, and then that will be your proficient report. The way they do it now is that you can just simply upload your evidence and then just open your annotation, and that's good enough. If you want to do annotations where you're doing text boxes and pointing arrows and all of that, you can. Okay, there's nothing to say that you can't. My suggestion though would be is to talk to your supervisor first and to ask what your supervisor wants. Okay, as you can see, I'm going to just show you something a little bit up here. As you can see, for evidence 1, I did the arrows and I did the text boxes and everything like that. And I will be 100% honest, I'm not very good at doing it. I think I spent more time on evidence 1, just getting the arrows to be where I wanted them to be, getting the text box to be where it wanted to be, and not moving everything else. When I realized that you don't have to do the arrows, that you don't have to do the actual annotations on the evidence itself, I think I did a little happy dance in the faculty room. And then I just went, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just going to upload the evidence that I've got and I'm going to write the annotations. And my supervisor was okay with that. So make sure you speak with your supervisor. If your supervisor does say, no, I do want to see the annotations. One of the things that I didn't realize until after I turned it in is the evidence only requires you to upload either a JPEG or a PDF or a Word doc of whatever it is that you're going to upload. If you're having trouble with the technology and it's giving you too much of a headache, print whatever it is that you need, get a ruler, get a pen, pencil, just manually do it, scan that as a PDF and then upload that. Because it turns out that handwritten notes and handwritten annotations are completely accepted by NESA. Yes, very cool. I agree with you. Okay, is there anything everyone else wants to look about in terms of the evidence in the annotation? Just gonna have a drink while I'm waiting. I'm going to take that as no, so I'm going to close that up. Yes, Chloe just said that sometimes the document just gets too big. It does. You also have a limit for what you can upload. NESA will only accept a document or a PDF or an image that is 10 megabytes or less. If you need to reduce the size of something, you can compress it, and you'll have to go onto Google to show how to compress a file. But you will find that the easiest way to do this is that if you're uploading a whole program or a whole unit of work or something, you have to consider that sometimes there is such a thing as too big when it comes to evidence, okay? Most evidence should be at most 2 to 3 pages, maybe 4, okay? You don't have to show an entire program or every single element of a unit. It's okay to be able to say that you're just going to take the first or second page with your and annotate that. If you want to be able to say that you have a whole complete program, but you've only uploaded a couple of pages as evidence, what you can do is you can just simply say that in the annotation and just say, due to the file limit of uploading evidence to ETAMs, I was only able to use 2 to 3 pages as my evidence. And that's going to be completely accepted. Provided the supervisor is happy with what you've given them, then you're going to be okay. Because NESA doesn't really want to store gigabytes and gigabytes and gigabytes of people's plans and units of work and all that sort of stuff. So always try and consider your evidence be 2 to 3 pages, maybe 4, and then you're okay. Right, I'm just going to stop that there, and I'm just going to go back to my trusty PowerPoint. Second. So, just recapping on the annotations, okay? I'm not going to read this all out. You guys have been hearing me talk about annotations long enough. The purpose of the annotation should be that you are simply explaining what it is your evidence is doing and how it meets the standard. Why your evidence has New South Wales DT sign? Let me see what you mean there. Oh, okay. So, I just figured out what you mean. Hang on, let me just check to make sure that I'm not presuming anything. Do you mean this blue bit up here, the evidence details? Surya, do you mean this blue section up
Yes,
here? Yeah. Okay.
the logo.
Okay.
Why that's got the logo?
Okay. So when you do your ETAMs in NESA, when the principal assigns you to, so what happens is when you log in, you're going to say, all right, I want to do my accreditation at X school. The principal of X school will accept that, and then the principal will then assign to you a supervisor. When you go to ETAMs, what happens is that ETAMs recognizes where your school is and it adds that logo for you. I didn't do anything for that. So when you go into ETAMS and you upload your evidence, you upload your descriptors and you put in your annotations, this is generated automatically. Now, if my school was in any other state, it would have the state logo on the side. It's because one of the funny things about NESA is that NESA is the education authority, but your work is actually owned by the governing body of that state. So they slap the New South Wales government logo on it. So anywhere you are in the country, it will have that. So if you're in Victoria, they'll have Victoria. If you're in Tassie, they'll have Tassie. And you don't get to change that. That's just an automatic thing. Okay, let me just get back to this. Okay. Let me just get this. Yeah. So your annotations should provide sufficient detail so that the evidence can be understood by others outside of the teacher's context. So I said this last week as well. You should be able to write whatever it is that you've written, give it to Joe Blow on the street, and he should be able to read it and understand it. If you're adding too much meta language or too much complication into your annotation, if it doesn't put your supervisor to sleep, there is a good chance it'll probably put your TAA to sleep. Just make it simple, make it easy. Again, write your annotation in Microsoft Word or a writing program. This will make editing a lot easier. One of the things that NESA do allow you to do is that once you have submitted some evidence and you've written your annotation, if you want to go back and edit it, you're allowed to edit it before you submit it to your supervisor. So it's very important to remember that if you are thinking about your annotations and you've just put up your evidence and you're lying in bed and you're looking up and seeing like, I think I made a mistake with my annotation. You're able to go back, just click back into it, and then you're able to edit it all again and then submit it again. But once you submit it to your supervisor, you then become locked out of it. So you won't be able to do any further edits. So I always say, do it in Microsoft Word first, just have all that backup. So then when you're 100% ready, you can just copy and paste it over. Your annotation should only be between 300 and 500 words. The NESA ETAMs do have a limit. I think the limit is 500 or 600 words. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to remember to look that up. Just a question here. This allowed me to put my evidence according to standard, correct? So all the evidence that you put up, you can link it to a standard. So for instance, without any supervisor. That's interesting. Okay, so you've been able, is Surya the only person who's been able to upload evidence without having a supervisor? Can anyone else confirm?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I just put my evidence. I talked to school. My school name was there. My supervisor is not formally assigned because I was for short time temporary, but they let me to put my evidence. I put my evidence, but I didn't put any annotation for it. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes, okay. All right. Did you have the option to be able to put your annotation in?
Not yet.
No. So you were able to upload the evidence, but you weren't able to do the annotation.
Not yet. I didn't try it.
Okay, that's interesting. I'll look into that and I'll see if I can get a concrete answer about that. Because my understanding, my understanding is that as Chloe has said here, you do need an approval from the school. But I'll look into that. I'll contact NESA and I'll see if I can get a straight answer about that. Because you should be able to upload your evidence and annotate at the same time. Leave that with me. That's an interesting one. And yeah, Just another thing on supervisors. Again, if you don't have a supervisor, right now, I know it's still the beginning of term one, you really should be talking to the schools you regularly go to and start asking to see if they can support you in getting your accreditation. The earlier you're having those conversations, the easier it's going to be for schools to know that there is a teacher that we have, teacher is reliable, teacher wants to get their accreditation, maybe we can call them in to do some work. If you are getting to a point where you're running out of time with your accreditation, the first thing you need to do is contact NESA. You need to explain the situation to them. They will give you an extension. They especially give extensions to casual teachers if they know that casual teachers haven't been able to get a whole lot of work in order to be able to collect enough evidence. If you're doing a short-term block or you're temporary, you can ask your schools to supervise you. I was temporary when I did mine, and my school is fine to do it. I've shown you my annotation already, so I think we're all good with that. And just have any questions? We can have a little question and answer session. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat box. I'm going to have another drink of water. So your school is set, Surya has said her school is not going to start the accreditation until next term. Is that correct? Okay. All right. My suggestion to you then would be is that until you're ready to start next term, just keep collecting the evidence that you need. Remember, you only need minimum of 5, maximum of 8 pieces of evidence. And so long as they all meet a standard and at least 2 descriptors.
Right.
Yeah. And as
My
long as
state not assign any supervisor or not do any work for accreditation until next term. I don't know why.
okay, so are they having trouble assigning you a supervisor?
They didn't mention anything. They said we're not going to start till term 2.
Okay, that could be for various factors. I know that QTR, quality teaching rounds, tend to start late in term 1 to term 2. And then there's just a lot of things that's going on in term 1 anyway. So, you know, if you're, depending on what school environment you're in, term 1 tends to be very busy for a lot of people. But it still means that you can do everything you need. So, like everything you need, you collect all your evidence. And then if you can ask, you know what you can do in term 1, if it's possible, ask if someone can observe you. And there's on our Facebook group, there's a form that I put up there, which is the observation form. If you don't have a supervisor yet, what you can do is at least get observed. And then you can count that as part of your term 1 work. So then when term 2 comes, ideally, whoever's your supervisor, you should be able to go to them and say, I've got everything ready to rock and roll. Here's everything. And then I can give you the report as soon as possible. And then you guys can start working on it with a report 90% finished, rather than, you know, okay, term 2 starts. We're now going to take our time in term 2 to get it. Okay. Lena asks a question here. How many descriptors do we need to address to meet a standard? Minimum is 2. Okay, so the way it works is that if you like the way I did it, is I linked it standard. So whatever standard is I was doing, like say for today it was standard 2. And then with my descriptors, I would only choose the descriptors from that standard. So I only choose descriptors from standard 2. And you only have to do 2 descriptors. Does that make sense? Yeah. To be honest, I find the descriptors a bit confusing sometimes, especially if you're trying to use a piece of evidence where you're trying to map from all the descriptors available to you. It can get very, very confusing. So the way it works is one piece of evidence, one standard to that evidence, 2 descriptors from that standard. No, not what evidence for each descriptive. So one piece of evidence, you link it to one standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then from there, you go, okay, well, for whatever that standard is that I'm linking that evidence to, I'm going to choose a minimum of 2 standards for, sorry, 2 descriptors from that standard. Does that make sense, Chloe? I'm pretty sure that I need it.
If I have good observation from 2 years ago, from 2018, I can use it. Am I right?
You can use it.
Yes, because I have good observation from first school that I have been by contractor, and I can use that one. As which that observation is, which standard is coming up? It is 2 or 3, 4 observation of a listener.
There is no time limit on the evidence that you can use. So what you can do is you can say, look, you know, if I've been a teacher for 5 years, okay, so until you become a proficient teacher, all of the evidence is counted in the time you were teaching.
Oh, great.
Okay. Just make sure that the observation form that you do have in the annotations, you do say that it was from another school. So then you're saying this evidence that I'm presenting is from another school. However, I've spoken with my supervisor who's seen it. Your supervisor will then have to do another observation for the now, because your supervisor had to write a report on you. But you can use that observation report from another school as a piece of evidence, and then you get the observation done in term 2 when your school's going to do it.
Again, okay.
Okay.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, Anne-Marie has a question. I was interested in seeing a few different types of lesson plans as uni lesson plans for me were years ago. Do you know if there are any lesson plan outlines where we could see how NESA today likes a regular lesson plan to be set out? Here's the thing about lesson plans. NESA does not like templates. For some reason, I don't know why, but templates are just not something that NESA particularly goes for. And if you talk to 5 different teachers about lesson plans, they're all going to tell you 5 different methods that they write a lesson plan. The thing about a lesson plan is that the only person you have to satisfy with a lesson plan has to be your supervisor. Okay, so some supervisors are okay with a very broad strokes approach, where you're saying, you know, these are some of the strategies I'm going to be using. This is the content I'm going to be teaching. Some supervisors are going to want incredible detail, where you're really knuckling down there and you're getting really into the details and how you're going to do a lesson plan. The only thing that you have to do with the lesson plan is you have to A, be able to understand it, B, follow it, C, modify it as you need to in the class. Because as anyone will tell you, if you make a plan, 5 minutes you walk into a classroom, that plan's changed. And then you're going to be doing catch up as time goes on. So the best thing to do is write a lesson plan that you're comfortable with. A lesson plan where you're able to say, okay, this is how I'm structuring my day. This is how I'm structuring my lesson. And then you just go with it. And then when your supervisor sees it, what your supervisor will do is it will actually go, okay, you know, let's have a conversation. Did this lesson plan work? Yes, no, why? You write that down as part of your professional learning, you know, whether that's in a note or whether that's in a meeting log or something. And then there's your evidence. Okay.
Yep, that makes sense. Thanks for that. That's good.
Yeah. Okay, so Clary is asking me to repeat in terms of the evidence and descriptors. So the way it works is one piece of evidence, link it to one standard. In the one standard, you just need to have a minimum of 2 descriptors from that standard. Does that make sense, Chloe? I've run out of water. Okay, so I'm going to presume that Chloe got that. And if one evidence, one standard meets two descriptors, yes. Okay, so Isabella is asking a question. So we can't use the lesson plan template? You can. I'm just saying that Nessa doesn't have one golden template that they want because they never really wanted to get around to doing it. Okay, Nessa has samples. The syllabus has, if you go to the New South Wales syllabus standards syllabus website, they have some examples as well. But the thing is with lesson plans is that everyone's got a unique take on it. So if you find a lesson plan template on Word and you want to use that, go ahead. If you want to hop onto Google and look up lesson plan template, go ahead and do that. If you want to make one up from scratch, go ahead and do that. It's incredibly individual. The only thing that a lesson plan should really show is a sequence of events that you're planning to do in your class. That's it, really. Chloe is asking a question. How current does evidence need to be within how many years? I answered this with Sarah, but I'll explain it again. From when you begin teaching to when you become proficient, all of that time in between is accounted evidence. So if you graduated in say 2016 and it's now 2021, but you want to use a piece of evidence from late 2016, early 2017, go ahead. Okay. The only thing is that you're going to find is the older the evidence, the more questions your supervisor is likely going to ask you. So your supervisor is going to say, okay, you've chosen this piece of evidence. Why have you chosen this piece of evidence? Do you see that you might have changed your teaching style between then and now? And again, that just becomes a bit of a conversation that you'll have. If your supervisor accepts that the evidence that you're using is valid, cool. If the supervisor goes, I'm not really sure about it, don't take it as an end of the world thing. Just think about it and go, okay, well, I need to now really look at my evidence and why I haven't been able to convince my supervisor that this is a piece of evidence I want to stand by as a teacher. Maria is now asking a question. So is a PowerPoint presentation or content in interactive computer exercises considered evidence for standard 2? Yes. So that you could be able to say that you're using ICT, that you're delivering content to students that might be audio-visual, and obviously the content in it itself that you'll be teaching. So PowerPoint's fine. PowerPoint actually has a really good option where you can actually print multiple slides onto one PDF, and then you can just have that one PDF and then just load that all up. You're welcome, Maria. Any other questions? You're very welcome, Chloe. Thank you all for being here. If there's no more questions, we'll be able to finish up for today. And next week, we will be tackling standard 3. So exciting times. You are all more than welcome to reach out to me via the group if you have any questions or you're getting a bit lost on something. But we will get you there, and hopefully the end goal is that, you know, my dream is to have somehow at the end of term 1 or the beginning of term 2, you know, so suddenly gets like 100 people suddenly putting in their proficiency reports, and then they're going, who's changed the difference? What's happened? And I'll just sit in the back cackling laugh. All right. Yes, please. It'd be nice to talk to other people. I saw Anne-Marie briefly. That was nice. Okay. There she is. Hi. Okay. I'm going to head off. Goodbye to all. And I will see you guys next week.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks very much. Turn our cameras next week, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh,
You're the last to leave.
I'm still here. All right, sorry. I just thought I'd try and I was a bit nervous, but I thought I'd just put it out there, get a bit friendly. You never know.
All right. See you later.
Thanks a lot. Bye.